Thanks, colleagues. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to our first knowledge event on PFA. Today we are going to be joined by colleagues from University of Essex. They are going to present their findings on the paper to what extent do public financial management systems support fiscal transparency and public accountability. This was a research paper commissioned by the PFA Secretariat, and it was actually launched by the Ministry of Finance from Slovakia. Our colleague Martina Kobylikova launched the event, and I'm very happy to see that our colleague Juraj is joining from Bratislava as well. So today we are going to have an introductory remarks from our Global Director, Arturo Herrera, and then we are going to go to the authors of the research paper, Professor Ala Zalata, Dr. Benandant Upadhyaya, Professor Collins Nitim, Dr. Faizul Haq, Professor Kalam Jayasinghe, and Professor Pawan Atihara, and Professor Theoravan Sabaroyan. I'm sure I butchered all of the names, but and then we will have 4 panelists, discussants for this paper. As I mentioned, Juraj Sucha from the Ministry of Finance from the Slovak Republic. And then we will have our colleague from the government of Nepal, Mr. Subhas Chandra Sivaskoti. And then we are going to have Irina Spranglevsky from Intosai Development Initiative. From University of Nevada, Professor Mehmet Serkan Tosun. And then we are going to have Darlene Zorubara from IFAC. With that brief introduction, I'm going to turn to Arturo.
Yeah, he spent half of my time, of my allocated time, presenting everybody who's going to be participating in a meeting. Let me just make 2 different kind of comments as a matter of introduction. The first one is that this seminar is pretty much in line with some of the things that we are trying to do now from the global department. And in general, the idea that we would like to develop research or data-informed policies. And that and the second one is that we want information that we produce, including the information coming from PFA, to serve not only as a guidance for
I've tried my sound. Sorry to trouble you. I've tried my sound. I can't understand why I can't hear anything.
Well, it's actually.
I can hear you, Steven. You can hear you clearly.
Yeah. I think the problem is with on your end. Okay, let me continue. As I said, the second motivation is that databases like PFA will inform not only policy and potential reform paths, but also help to get a more deeper understanding of some of the, in this case, financial management aspects. Now, having said so, I have a confession to make. When I first heard the title, to what extent the public financial management system supports fiscal transparency and public accountability, my question was, why do we have this seminar? Why do they wrote a paper about it? It shouldn't be obvious that the information for fiscal transparency and accountability comes from the financial systems. Very quickly, Adrian reminded me that although in principle the information is there, not all the reforms were designed with transparency in principle, and although it was there, it was not necessarily made available. And that reminded me my own words. So one has to be careful of what one said, because over the last few weeks I have been insisting in several other venues that actually the first waves of particularly IFMIS reforms were thought about making the life of public officials easier. It was pretty much a back of office reforms yet. So let me, and that trigger a series of inner reflections when when I'm awake at times I'm supposed to be sleeping. So that reminds me of two stories I'm gonna share related to that, to this one. We have 12 years ago a project to implement the second generation IFMIS in Colombia, and that was a time that I had just come back to the bank, and I happened to know very closely the finance minister of Colombia, who was my classmate in New York. Right, he was a newly appointed finance minister, and so the reform was also new to him. He inherited basically. So I was having a chat, and I knew him very well, right? So he was a macro person, right? He had worked for the central bank, for the Ministry of Finance, for planning, and at some point when the evening was almost ready, he surprised me. He said, "Can you introduce a transparency module? Can you make the information transparent?" And I'll talk with the TTL, which was Henry Forero. I don't know if it was formally the TTL, but the person who was implementing. He said, "Yeah, we could do it." And the team worked for 6 months and implemented it. But there was something that was bothering me, right? Because my friend was a macro person. He was not necessarily, he's the kind of person that when you implement these reforms, what is relevant about it is about fiscal control, it's about transparency. And the thought was always there. And one day when I was again in Colombia, he told me, "I'm going to tell you what I implemented, the transparency model." And he said, "Colombia is full of corruption and I'll give up. I cannot stop it. So what I wanted to do is just open all the information." And this is, I'm quoting him verbatim, "and people will find out if the cousin of a vice minister is getting a contract." So even at a relatively early stage, even some policymakers were already thinking about opening accounts for that. Now, the interesting story is that the module that they opened was very useful for management. So they realized that the comparisons that they wanted the public to do, the public actually had no interest in doing it, but the president had the interest of doing it, and he started comparing it. So one of the questions that is important is not only if the information is made available, but to what extent and who could make a good use of it. And I think the jury is still out. So the final lesson from that is that probably now when we design reforms, and I think we have been doing that for the last few years, transparency is pretty much at the front and center of our PFM activities. It's not an afterthought. It's not a module they ask us to implement when the system is almost ready. So let me stop here.
Great, thank you. Now we are going to turn out our cousins in University of Essex. They are going to give us the presentation. Please, okay, we are on time, and you have 20 minutes allocated, and let's have a good presentation, then we will go to the discussions.
Thank you so much. Can I ask you all, can you see my screen and can you hear me, please?
Yes, we do.
Thank you so much. So yeah, first of all, I would like to say thank you very much for PIFA and World Bank team for giving us this opportunity to conduct this interesting research. And as previous speakers already mentioned, Sadar and Arturo, about the issues related to corruption, fiscal transparency, and public accountability. I think these topics related to corruption is very sensitive, and whatever is information or knowledge is available in the books or in the reports may not give us the very detailed picture until and unless, as you have mentioned, we talk to people. So hopefully you'll find these research findings very interesting. My colleagues and I are going to present this paper, this research report that we have conducted within the context of 3 developing countries, Ghana, Sri Lanka, and Nepal. And because of all of these colleagues' contribution, we have been able to complete this report. So I would like to say thank you to my colleagues, to PIFA team, and to the World Bank team for all of their support. So there are three research questions that in this study we are trying to we try to investigate, examine, or explore, because we have done a mixed sort of method we have applied. In first two research question, where we have looked at the empirical association between PFM system and fiscal transparency and public accountability. And in the second stage of this quantitative study, we have looked at the moderating factors, and that's where my colleagues will explain how our study makes some sort of contribution in this area, and which can be helpful for policy reforms. Supreme Audit Institution, independence, parliamentary oversight, and especially females' participation in political leadership. So how these institutional factors moderate the association between PFM system and fiscal transparency and public accountability. So once we have conducted this quantitative study, in the next phase, we try to look at the broader picture, and we try to explore the extent, to what extent does public sector corruption thrive in the period of national global emergencies such as COVID-19 pandemic, which we all are aware of, and what role can a reformed PFM system play in addressing such sort of corruption. And briefly, before I move to the method and our conceptual framework, briefly I want to give you this context. And before we move to this, our reviewers, one of the question was why these countries? And we also want to acknowledge the constructive comments of all of our reviewers, although some of the comments were not very easy to address, but still it helped us improve our report. So similar socioeconomic characteristics we can see on all these three countries. They all follow this Westminster model of Supreme Audit Institution. And we also refer to some of the statistics like Human Development Index, Gini coefficients for widespread poverty and inequality in all these developing countries. And also we try to bring some sort of reference to support our claim in terms of the perceived level of corruption in these three countries, which seems very high if you look at the score of Transparency International. And most of all, as I mentioned very briefly earlier, it's not very easy to get data in this sort of sensitive topic like corruption. People are reluctant to talk about this sort of topic, especially when we have recorded interviews. So we also try to talk to our stakeholders off the record to have some sort of deeper insight how these sort of things are working, how PFM systems are working in terms of addressing the issue of potential risk of corruption. And we have used two different methodology. In the first stage, I have briefly mentioned, we use quantitative approach using the data set, which my colleague will explain in detail. And in the next phase, we have done 27 semi-structured interviews. And this is where we got valuable insights from the government officials, from other stakeholders, and politicians. We have interviewed a range of stakeholders in all these three countries. And we have got very rich data set from interview. And very briefly, I will touch about this conceptual framework of our study. If you look at this inside the box white part, this is our conceptual model for our empirical study for quantitative side. So we looked at public finance management system and public accountability and fiscal transparency relationship. And these three role of these three moderating variables like Supreme Audit Institution, parliamentary oversight, and female participation in leadership, especially in parliament. And if you look at outside this box, all these boxes in the green boxes, so we try to explore the role of broader factors like institutional mechanism. And we argue that the idea of cultural, political, economic framework help us to understand more holistically the issue of public financial management decisions in changing, discharging, and delivering public accountability and transparency, especially by state and non-state stakeholders, so like government and others. So I leave it to our colleagues to carry on from here. Dr. Faizul Haq and Professor Pavan Adhikari and Professor Jiruban Subaran to present the rest of the paper. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vedanand, for this. So I'll take you through to the quantitative part of our research. As Vedanand mentioned, that we tried to address the first two research questions with the help of quantitative research, and that's based on the data that is primarily available from the PFA Secretariat, and also we collected additional data from external sources. So this is just to give you an idea about the sample coverage from multiple regions in the world. So the total sample is observation is 265 from 119 countries, and it is capturing 5 different regions. Thank you. So in terms of the variables, as I mentioned, we have got two broad-based indicators, a dependent variable. One is fiscal transparency and another is public accountabilities. As you can see from here, we've got 3 different proxies of public transparency and 4 proxies for public accountability. And within that, we try to capture both PFA-oriented transparency and public accountability measures, and also we got 2 additional external measures. So in terms of public transparency, we got transparency indicators from PFA and also the net borrowing as a percentage of GDP as an external measure. And for public accountability, again, in addition to PFA measures, we used Transparency International CPI index as an additional external measure of public accountability. For independent variable, our prime aim was to examine the impact of PFM quality, so that's our independent variables. And for moderating variable, for second research question, we have got 3 institutional characteristics, such as supreme audit institutions, parliamentary oversight, and women's role in the parliament as 3 moderating variables. Thank you. So just to give you an idea about the score, the mean values of the 3 broad-based indicators that we are using, notably the PFM systems quality, which is our independent variables, fiscal transparency as our dependent variable, and budget credibility as our dependent variable. So this just to comparison of these indicators across 5 regions. Thank you. So just to summarize the findings, we had 2 hypotheses for the first research question. First one was in relation to the linkage between PFM quality and fiscal transparency, and the second hypothesis was the linkage between PFM quality and public accountability. And our results, we have got statistically significant evidence in support of both hypotheses, suggesting that the PFM system's quality has a positive, statistically significant positive relationship with the fiscal transparency and public accountability that are capturing both PFA-oriented indicators and also the external measures. So just to show you the results, again, possibly I hope that you can see this. We can see that in terms of the results, we have got multiple alternative dependent variables for fiscal transparency. So the first 2 columns, we try to present the combined measure of fiscal transparency. Just to explain to you the context here, which is we try to capture 2 framework. One is 2011 PFA framework and 2016 PFA framework. So we try to combine them to have a holistic understanding about the PFA system on fiscal transparency. So we have got multiple different measures, and all measures are giving us the result that we expected. Thank you. Again, the same for public accountability. You have got multiple indicators, and they are broadly supporting our hypothesis, the second hypothesis, which is talking about the linkage between PFM and public accountability. So the second research question, which is about the moderating effect of supreme audit institutions, so the three indicators that we are using. So we have got reasonably mixed result. Please just see the show the table. So the table is, so the table, Vedanta, to remind, just showing the table, please. Yes, so the table shows that the supreme audit institutions, there are three indicators: supreme audit institutions and parliamentary oversight and women's role in parliament. I'm just trying to summarize the result because just to save our time. Our results are mixed whenever we use them as standalone variables. All three institutional characteristics are having the desired effect, the relationship that we expect, possibly positive relationship. However, whenever we use them as an interaction variable, our results are largely inconclusive. So we suggest that this might be possible. One of the reasons might be because of the very limited number of sample we have got and very limited country level variations in these institutional characteristics. So that's the reasons we have got mixed result for the interaction variables. So with that note, I'd like to pass it on to my colleague, Professor Adhikari. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Faisal and Badan. So I think based on this qualitative analysis are based on we have drawn on from the semi-structured interviews, like for almost like 27, 28 interviews in 3 different countries. So, and then the views expressed were multiple. So there were views in support of PFM system or the PFM reforms, and there were also a lot of concerns about to what extent the PFM reforms or the systems have improved accountability and governance overall. So basically, so when we talk about this, how the positive impact of reform, basically our participants talk about the digitalization. Let's say how this has reduced this bureaucratic hurdle and how it has helped deliver public services more effectively on a timely basis. And then they will also talk about this how there's improvement in accounting or reporting system. For instance, we have a lot of how the statements from Nepal, they're saying how the establishment of this treasury single account has helped government to provide report on a timely basis for the cash management or expenditure management. So I think that is a very good development. And they were also concerned that, of course, because of the reforms undertaken in the last decades, they have kind of created some kind of awareness of, let's say, about the Public Account Committee or the Auditor General Office. They seem to be more engaging. So in a sense, I think they were like, we see clearly the development of awareness in probably among citizens about the importance of reform. And at the same time, we also find, of course, they were also concerned that to what extent the reforms or the existing system have helped address the existing problems, like problems of this mismanagement or corruptions, or especially budget irregularities, etc. So maybe next slide, please, Badan. Yeah. So So the most, I think, like very often, let's say when we talk about this issue, and then like participants in all 3 countries, we're talking about this procurement, and that is very much connected to mismanagement of financial resources, because there's a lot of rules and regulations have been violated in the process. So I think there's very much this cases of corruption. When we talk about corruption, is very like in the PFM system, it is to a large extent connected. We found that it is connected to procurement, and that is the same in, like for instance, like in Ghana, one of our participant mentioned, when you talk about corruption, the major source of corruption is public procurement, and that is more or less the same in Nepal and Sri Lanka. So there's a lot of violation of regulations. And then also there's the other problem they talk about is that this effectiveness of PFM, let's say to what extent this about the enforcement or the implementation. So I think that also created a lot of problem, and that is also because when you talk about to what extent the PFM system are effective, and then they were talking about the more or less same thing. It's a lot of this when there's a normal house situation that it may work to some extent, but when there's an emergency like COVID, and that the system is not is not flexible enough, and that provides a lot of leeway to go against the regulation and then go against this existing procedures, etc. Yeah, then the other, of course, I think the one thing is, of course, not to blame the PFM system or reform as such, but many participants, they were kind of positive about the PFM reform or the existing system. But the problem was, I think, to what extent because they have been not able to implement it as intended because of the political interferences. There's a lot of political intervention at each level, let's say, in terms of recruitment, in terms of, let's say, like even like transfer of bureaucrats, because they start learning the new system and then they will transfer to different offices. The new person will come. So I think those kind of problems exist in all these three countries. So the whole system is not this selection of this administrator or the training capacity. They are not very transparent. It's very much political driven. It's more or less the same voices being echoes in all three countries. Maybe next slide, Pradhan. So yeah, then the other problem was, of course, in the last, let's say, many years, there were a lot of reforms have been undertaken, but the implementation has been a key issue. You know, of course, so the key ideas were there because those reforms were very good, but their implementation have been not as expected. So the people or like the things that is connected to the reform, like good governance or transparency or this extended accountability. So to what extent these objectives have been met? So I think these were the concern in all these three countries. But we see some kind of positive development also, like there's some more engagement of citizens or citizen association, and they were putting pressure to government for the extended accountability. So in a sense, I think that we can see the awareness of citizens, and they were also kind of putting pressure for empowering oversight institutions like Auditor General Office, like the Parliament Account Committee. So there were a lot of pressure coming from the citizens, but still the pressure, to what extent the pressures have changed this politicization can be questioned. So overall, it's just like, of course, there's a lot of positive changes in terms of digitalization, but the problem the same is a weak implementation or enforcement, and there's a political capture, and we also see a lack of coordination among government department or the oversight institution, and then there's impunity. I think that is probably a key problem. And also, they were concerned that there's a need to empower this oversight institution like Supreme Audit Institution or the Parliament Account Committee that should be more empowered. I think these were the voices coming from our interviews. Yeah. Over to you, Stephen.
Thank you. Thank you. Mindful of time, I know I'm the last one speaking, so it's always that's okay. I think in terms of policy recommendations we've put in the report, I think it's clear from what we've said already. Is issues around finding things that are working. So the digitalization and e-governance is working, but as I've personally heard from various interviewees, is the ability to bypass it in the sense that, for example, I think in one of the countries the issue was the fact that although a large number of contracts were on the e-procurement system, the value of most of the contracts, the higher value contracts, were not on the system. So it gave an impression that a lot of contracts were e-procured, but in fact, the value of the largest contracts were not, and were still going through basically manual, or if you want, sort of open to a lot of discretion. So just simply trying to implement this would certainly make a big difference and address, I think, what we've heard already around the issue of procurement. There's also the effective implementation. Again, many interviewers have been very, very positive and very commendable about the laws, the legislation, and regulations being put on, including what we call taking action sanctions in case issues have been found regarding unauthorized spending and so on and so forth. However, it is the actual implementation of these enforcement, is the fact that sometimes cases only happen after many, many years, and therefore by this point, there's an argument that there's no need to prosecute anymore, to raise the matter anymore, especially when, for example, Auditor General reports eventually come too long after the event. So there is an aspect of that, and there's also an aspect of who prosecutes and who is in charge of prosecuting in those cases. There's a lot of emphasis, obviously. I think this is not necessarily from not too surprising, but the need to be really focusing on citizen priorities when it comes to budgeting. We've also mentioned something about the how to bring incentive systems so that at least the people who are doing by the book, who are actually working according to what the rules are, should be probably certainly be encouraged and supported. Next slide, please. The next
you have last 3 minutes.
Yeah, I will be done before that. Thank you very much. Citizen participation, to be able to encourage citizen participation at all levels. I think one thing that I've heard at the beginning is I just caught a little bit of a conversation at the beginning around how do we also enact more public participation. Mechanisms have been talked about giving citizen participation, but whether there is actually happening on the ground is also a debate here. And I was recently discussing with on a project on GIZ regarding community-based institutions. How do we bring people through community-based institutions to work and effectively work with the state, the government, the local government, so that there's a much more regular kind of interaction between citizenry and local government, rather than a punctual or once in every few weeks type of consultation. And finally, in terms of the final two recommendations is whether, and we appreciate that PEFA framework can do many things, but not necessarily everything. But we thought that PEFA framework could perhaps try to integrate those aspects within its evaluation. For example, to what extent public expenditure and public procurement contracts are made outside of digitized systems, so that there's at least some visibility of system PFM systems that are still relying on outside e-procurement systems. And lastly, also a lot of legislation have talked about taking sanctions. Again, to what extent actually these sanctions are happening and are being enforced would have been useful from a PEFA framework point of view. I think that more or less brings to my conclusion, and thank you for your attention, and we very much look forward to the questions and comments, and not simply just as sort of what else can we do, can we think about in terms of future future initiatives and future research projects. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Now we'll go to Bratislava, to Juraj.
Thank you very much. Can I please ask you whether you can all hear me and see me? Okay, perfect. So yeah, thank you very much for having me, for inviting me. Briefly, an introduction. My name is Juraj Šuchta. I have worked at the Ministry of Finance for over 10 years. I'm dealing mostly with macro fiscal issues from an analytical point of view. I'm not involved in all the PFM functions, but mostly on those related to economic side of how economists look at these kind of things. The topic is very relevant for us, so I'm very glad about this paper. Let me briefly share experience in Slovakia with these kind of issues. So the PFM agenda became very interesting for us, especially in the past few years when PFM systems were very much challenged by recent crises. Actually, our debt increased by, in a very short period of time, increased by 10 percentage points, and also deficit increased sharply from 1% to 6%. And this basically happened also under weakened PFM system. There was need to act very swiftly to combat those crises, and policymakers were under less scrutiny. There were a lot of increase of laws which were adopted under shorter consultation, so they were under lower scrutiny. also the number of amending acts which are under lower scrutiny also went up. So basically the PFM system were very much challenged. Also this contributed to the fact that the fiscal performance deteriorated. So by this I'm trying to say that it's very important to keep track on PFM system functioning well. So let me go into the paper. I think it's a very interesting topic. The paper is also very rich from the point of view of the literature review. Basically, the main conclusion is that the evidence or the relationship between PFM and fiscal transparency or public accountability is rather inconclusive. So I'm glad that we're having a paper now that kind of tries to form a more significant relationship. So that's very good. When I read the paper, I was very much interested in what is actually meant by fiscal transparency and public accountability, because this can be understood and interpreted by many people in a very different way. So the paper very usefully specifies what it actually means by the notions of both PFM, fiscal transparency, and also public accountability. So that's very well written in the paper. Also, it should be acknowledged from the very start that it's quite challenging normally in econometrics to prove kind of causal relationship when institutional setup is involved in the analysis, because all in all, to capture well the quality of PFM system is quite challenging. I also remember from my previous experience that even when economists try to establish more obvious causalities, like for example fiscal rules and fiscal performance, that's very tricky to prove. So in this case, it's even trickier from my point of view. So basically, the paper has a very challenging task in its own objective. Now let me move a little bit to more technical comments, which I have. So starting with basically the econometric method that is used. I understand here the options are very much restricted by the fact that the sample size is rather small. We do not have PEFA assessment for very for many countries, and also we do not have them over a longer period of time. So I understand the method chosen is basically basic regression, but on the other hand, it's good that then the regression plays also with some kind of alternative methods of how to econometrically test a relationship. Also, I think it's in this kind of research, it's very sensible that there is a combination of quantitative and more qualitative approach, also because of the fact that it's the institutional settings that's very difficult to capture only with quantitative analysis. So I find it useful. I have a few thoughts on basically how the regression was constructed. So when I was reading the results of the regression analysis, my impression was that there could be a little bit more discussions on how actually the PFA dimensions were selected to construct the key variables in the regression. And with that, I mean how the basically public accountability was constructed, how the fiscal transparency was constructed, and also how the PFM variable was constructed. Because my main remark is that these PFA pillars, they're quite diverse, right? For example, when we're talking, for example, about PFA pillar 4, there is also, for example, existence of debt sustainability analysis, and that, in my view, doesn't necessarily need to have direct implications for how public accountability variable is derived, because that the main idea how the public accountability is captured is by showing basically the variance between overall expenditures and how it was budgeted and what's the difference, and also what was the basically differences in the composition of budgetary items compared to what was the initial plan. And for example, in that perspective, the debt sustainability analysis, in my view, in theory, one would not expect a completely, straight relationship. So my idea would be maybe to complement the analysis a little bit, and by playing with a bit narrower scope of PFA dimension. So maybe not working with the whole pillars, but maybe just checking a little bit individually what's under all the pillars, and trying to match process-oriented dimensions with outcome dimensions on a more individual level. So that's something that could be also done to maybe do kind of a sensitivity analysis of the whole analysis. But in the end, I understand that the paper also plays a little bit with how public accountability is defined, and fiscal transparency as well. So these problems should be mitigated definitely to some extent. So this was my only remark, but other than that, I think the paper is very interesting, and and I hope to see more projects like that in the future. And I'd like to thank the authors of the paper very much. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Colleagues who are online, please use the chat box to pose questions if you have any. Now we will go to Kathmandu. Mr. Subas.
Okay, thank you very much. Namaste from Nepal. Yeah, it's my good opportunity to share with you my views in here, and to be here in this program. Yes, of course, this study, this research paper represents the many good things in the PFM issues. So I would like to thank the whole research team to present in this way. I would like to highlight, and I would like to acknowledge that here are so many good this conceptual framework presented in here, and there are some dependent variables. These dependent variables are so crucial and analyzed very systematic ways. So I would like to thank in this way, because there are so many difficulties in developing countries to gather the information, proper PFM informations, so that they can analyze systematically, and its implications can represent and suggest properly. So this is a nice structured research paper. For this, I would like to congratulate again to all research team in this form. Yeah, I have some. I studied this research paper once, and based on that, my general experiences, I'd like to say some things. I have almost 25 years PFM field's journey in Nepalese context. During this period, I observed something in Nepalese context. This Nepalese context is not only for the important to Nepal and some few countries. It is almost similar situation to all the developing countries. Developing countries scenario is almost same. Yeah, in the PFM issues, it is not simple things. The word is simple, but it's linkage and its implications are not simple in the use. That's why the findings that represents may have effects from the few aspects, and that may represent the few aspects. They have the other. They may have other dimensions too. So my observation also may have represent limited things. You all will accept these things positively. Okay, thank you very much for this preliminary my opinions. And then I found that this paper's findings are linked to fiscal transparency, public accountability, and its institutional factors. I would like to link on this to the institutional aspects in here, because institutional aspects in here. In Nepalese context, the institutional factors are affected by the three things. One is financial rules and regulation. Another one is financial control and facilitation mechanism. And third one is working environment and culture. These all things is captured in this research paper in different ways. I have found also these things are are analyzed in by using the dependent variables and related information. I found these things. So this is good in my sense. So major institutional mechanism, what is shown in here is almost appropriate in Nepalese context. That's why the analysis is representing somehow the ground reality in perfect way. So I found this in this way. Besides the limited times presentation, here is not presented some information. So I would like to say very shortly that the institutional mechanism in Nepal are the same what we are practicing in other countries. Parliamentarian committees, Office of Auditor General as a SAI, Ministry of Finance, and National Planning Commission and other line ministries, Financial Controller's Office, and spending units. These are the key institutional arrangements in our country. That's why, based on that, I have some observations. So, first of all, based on this, first of all, I would like to say one thing. The issue of these three leading questions is not simple to analyze and to represent at all. So, first of all, we need to think that decision-making role and implementation role in PFM is quite crucial, and its implication is quite different. For example, this paper is highlighted that the political interventions and other relations between political phenomena and administrative mechanisms are highlighted in this paper. These highlighting factors are good, but we need to think that the misunderstanding between the decision-making role and implementing role between political sides and administrative sides or bureaucratic sides is still not clear. Because of that, the PFM issues, PFM's contribution, PFM interventions, positive contribution is not being, how can I say, is not being so much productive. That's why we need to clarify the rules in this way, the decision-making rules and implementing rules. That these rules is directly affects to the institutional factors. So it would be better to analyze in this way, but we can explore in the upcoming areas of the interventions here. For this one example, I would like to say in here that oversight mechanisms issue is being raised in developing countries in PFM issues. Many oversight agencies are being active. If we can see the too much involvement of the oversight agencies, then that indicates that the inefficiency of the PFM contribution. If there is the efficient PFM contribution in the place, the oversight number of oversight agencies role may cut off. So for this, how can we improve in this way? We all policymakers and PFM activists should think that the predictable and transparent PFM implementation mechanism within the executive public organization may improve the situation. For example, if the spending units implementing mechanism is simple and predictable, then that types of things will be improved, and that may help to reduce the corruption practice and other things. So my concern is here that the digitalization system, the digitalization in PFM is very much effective, is being very effective to improve the PFM system. So now in Nepalese context, I have observed two things in the future journey of the interventions. Two things. One is a digitalization of a PFM system at all. Another one is the predictable procurement system, procurement management system is another area to be improved in the field. So this research paper very much nicely presented the journey of intervention. So this based on this research paper, we can work further more on it. So this is my overall observation in here.
Thank you.
And overall solution in here. At last, I would like to say one small observation that in this paper's page 53, there is one sentence mentioned that corruption practice in schools observations. These types of on that sense in Nepal, the people guardians are not so much interested to enroll their students, their children in government school. They are interested to enroll in public school. So there is easy access at all. Some small things we need to think that the information may represent at all, or the information may represent the information is representing in limited way. Very small comments in here. Otherwise, other things, the research paper is very nicely structured, and all many issues are represented at the ground level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Subas. Okay, we'll go to Oslo. Irina, over to you, please.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. First of all, I want to thank you for inviting IDI to speak in this webinar. And of course, we had the interactions with the PEFA Secretariat over the past years. And it's always enlightening and fruitful to engage in these interventions. So I'm Irina Spenglevsky. I'm a manager in IDI. I'm very happy to be here today. And just starting very briefly, if you don't know IDI so well, it's the Intosai Development Initiative, and we work with supreme audit institutions, SAIs globally. And in short, our mission is to support SAIs in developing countries in sustainably enhancing their performance and capacities. So working in IDI means that SAIs are very close to my heart, and I will provide more some reflections more from the IDI perspective based on the work that we have done with SAIs globally for many years. But first, I want to say that I found the paper very interesting, and I would like to thank the authors for providing some additional insights into the PFM debate. And it's also refreshing to access more insights into the role of SAIs. And I think in general, the literature on SAIs can be somewhat limited, although there is some information and data available, but more, your research paper and more research on the role of SAIs is very welcome, I think. So in brief, I think you also, reflected on this in your paper. Supreme audit institutions are recognized as a key part in the country's accountability chain as an oversight institution auditing government funds. And I think, yes, you also touched upon it, but SAIs are most effective when working together with key stakeholders such as parliament, CSO, citizens, and anti-corruption agencies. So it was mentioned in the paper that the implications of establishing or strengthening supreme audit institutions so far do not yet materialize so far into systematic benefits for public accountability and transparency. So you mentioned now in your presentation there could be a partial or positive effect, but you also reflected on that there are a number of concerns that prevent oversight mechanisms from functioning properly. I think you also reflected on in your paper. So I just wanted to emphasize from the start, from my viewpoint as well, that the impact of SAIs is, of course, as you mentioned, influenced by many aspects that can influence how effective an SAI is, such as, for instance, their independence, mandate, resources available, and so forth. So I think when reading the paper, there are many findings from the report that also resonate with my and IDI's experiences from working with SAIs, and many of your findings also have links to focus areas in the current discourse in the SAI community, and also IDI's current and planned work with SAIs. So I wanted to reflect on some of these key areas, since it can shape the SAI's role and capacity on influencing and improving countries' PFM systems, both now in the current but also in a future-looking perspective. So in brief, to also, from our perspective, to shed a bit more light on the work of SAIs based on our experience. So I think the first area I wanted to talk a little bit about is when it comes to budget credibility, where IDI is partnering with the International Budget Partnership in terms of looking into helping SAIs in advancing in this area. So there is a handbook developed by IBP. IDI also contributed. So this handbook explores different approaches to auditing budget credibility, and it also provides some guidance and practical examples to support SAIs to further advance when it comes to these efforts. So it emphasizes that SAIs also have an important role in strengthening the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, and also ensuring that the country's budget is on track. And it also highlights the unique position of SAIs to help assess and improve budget credibility. So we are looking forward to exploring this topic further, and also it's an area where SAIs can take a stronger role in the future. Of course, there are many SAIs who are currently also doing something in this area, but it's also an area that is seen as something to explore and strengthen. So I think these reflections on the credible budget, it also, has an aspect, a linked aspect to corruption, and you reflected a lot on corruption also linked to COVID-19 in the paper. And you also mentioned in the paper that the number of interviews, I think, acknowledged the limitations of PFM systems in preventing and controlling irregularities and fraud. So, of course, I just want to talk a little bit more also about the SAI's role in fighting corruption and addressing corruption. And I think you already talked about that it's a challenging area to address, and it's also very much so from the SAI perspective. And I think based on our work with SAIs and the collaboration with SAIs in terms of addressing corruption, what we have seen is that there is often an expectation gap between what SAIs can do versus what is expected from them. So, for instance, for SAIs, the mandate doesn't always, the mandate of SAIs is in many countries not so clearly understood when it comes to addressing corruptions. And SAIs, of course, have a role in detecting fraud, but when it comes to sanctioning and follow-up, this is not the primary role of many SAIs, and often not a very strong or explicit part of their mandate. So often the SAIs would need to, hand over cases they find to other oversight and anti-corruption institutions. So I think it's very clear, and it also strengthens the findings that you have, of course, that in the national integrity system, one pillar is the size and oversight institutions, then civil society play a role, judiciary play a role. And of course, it resonates very much with us in terms of what you mentioned in terms of challenges in coordination. Of course, it's one of the key factors, but based on our experience as well, it's very challenging when it comes to sharing information.
Irina, can you, if we can, we will have other reviewers as well. Can we? All right.
Sorry?
Can you have last 2 minutes if you can?
Yes, I'm very
we have
close.
others as well. Thank you.
Sorry, lost a bit track of time, but very few points left. Yes.
All right.
Okay, thank you. So leaving the aspect of anti-corruption, but I think it's very clear that the SAIs have an important role there, and your finding resonate with us, and we'll see a bit into the future also how we can work more with SAIs in this area. I think the last aspect I wanted to mention then is, you mentioned audit reports, and then of course that is one of the key outputs of Supreme Audit institutions. So one trend that we also see is that many SAIs are currently working on this, also with more timely and more user-friendly audit reports. And also we see that SAIs start to use more innovative methods of presenting audit results to reach a broader variety of stakeholders. So I think this was just some reflections from our work with SAIs over the past years. And again, I want to thank the authors and the PFA for arranging this webinar. And I think just to quickly sum up, SAIs plays an important role, and it is also about in the future to help and empower SAIs, I think, in terms of addressing challenges that impact their ability to fulfill their role and mandate. And I think some of the findings from the paper, we can also use some of the insights from the paper, we can also use in our future work with SAIs. So the paper was very welcome and interesting. Thank you very much. And then I will leave the floor to the next.
Great. Thank you. Thank
Yes.
you very much. Now we are coming to US. We'll go to Nevada, to Reno. Professor Tosun, over to you, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Serdar. Can you all hear me okay? I'm assuming. All right.
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure to be in this webinar. It's very interesting stuff, of course. And I want to start by saying that, for full transparency, we have a small working group jointly with the World Bank that is looking at the impact of PFA assessment on some outcome variables, other outcome variables. So it's, of course, it was very nice to see this paper and read this paper, and happy to be reviewing it, because it is really going in parallel with some of the work that we are doing. So this is, I will say, of course, that this is definitely in the right direction, in my opinion. And let me also say that in this, I'm gonna be focusing on the quantitative side of the report, of course, being the economist also in the group, and in the quantitative analysis, I guess you can be looking at two different things with PFA, or PFM systems, PFA being a measure. So you could be looking at and just maybe saying this in terms of a regression analysis. You can put PFA or PFM on the left-hand side and try to explain it. You can basically discuss what are the drivers, what are the factors that lead to like the assessment that we're seeing for specific countries. Or of course you can put PIFA on the right hand side of the equation and say that, well, like having done PIFA assessment, so what are some of the outcomes? So the paper, at least like in definitely in the a big part of the research, quantitative research, with the first question, for instance, doing exactly that, and that's what we are doing as well. So that's why I'm saying that it is going in parallel. And the challenges with this kind of work, and the authors, actually pointed to this thing, which is the right thing to do, is that this is not going to give us like a true panel, right? So it is very unbalanced. So different countries have done it in different years, and the number of times, like, the PIFA has been done, like, of course, varies by country over time. So you cannot definitely do a full panel study on this one. It is more like a pooled cross-sectional analysis, as we will call it. So, and then another thing related to that is that, well, okay, because we have a lot of countries doing it, but because this is not happening every year, that limits the sample. So the quantitative analysis, we always say the more the better. So like more data, the better, but the number of observations will be limited. And that's the case. We have seen that the number of observations were pretty low in some of the regressions, especially. And I understand it because, again, I'm also working on this like with some other colleagues. So yeah, I think the paper, great presentation, by the way. So good job on that one. And the paper is very nice to read. Now, the one thing that I noticed that, in my opinion, could be an issue to think about for sure is so you have PIFA-related variables in the regression as explanatory variables, right? So, indicating like the quality of the PFM and so on. And you also have PIFA-related variables on the left-hand side, in the dependent variables for fiscal transparency and accountability. Now, of course, you're also using external measures. But what I'm basically thinking is that when you are looking at a regression like this, the left-hand side variable, the outcome variable that you're trying to explain, in my opinion, should be external variables. So because PIFA assessment is done with a group from the World Bank, and it is, of course, internally consistent, right? So, and you're looking at what PIFA and PFM is doing in terms of like these things that you're trying to explain, such as fiscal transparency. So you need external validity in a way, right? So you need to be looking at the impact of PFM on these variables. You also have, I believe, like net borrowing is one of them. You also have external variables, so that's fine. But again, I mean, seeing that PIFA-related variables on both sides made me think. So I need to maybe think a little bit more on this one, but that could be an issue, of course. So what are some of the other interesting aspects? So and I will mainly point out the things that this, where this research could be going in the future, because I think that's really important, right? So like, how do we follow up? Like, what is the next step? So what is the next line of research here? So I think with this kind of topic, we need to go beyond the correlation aspect of it. And again, I totally understand correlation doesn't mean causation, and it's very difficult to establish causation with these studies. And the authors are very careful, and I commend that. They call it association, right? So we need to be very careful. But is there something else we can do? And I'll point out the fact that not every country, even in the developing world, like doing PIFA assessments, right? So heavily based, of course, on low-income countries. So sub-Saharan Africa makes almost like half of the observations in the regression. So I understand that, but I think the direction that we want to take this is, can we look at the countries that have done PFA as opposed to the ones that didn't do PFA, and then compare them in different time periods. And we call them like quasi-experimental studies, right? So not fully experimental. I mean, this is not unfortunately hard science, but you can do quasi-experimental where you can, again, compare the countries that did do PFA as opposed to others between time periods and see that relative to a control group, are we seeing differentially seeing a different result, for the PFA countries. That's a good direction to go with this kind of research. Of course, it has to start with this research, with this kind of study that I'm looking at. So this is definitely, that's why I said this is definitely going in the right direction. But how can we add more? And I think that's one way to do it. That will definitely bring in more robustness. So imagine that you are showing us associations. Okay, so if you also see these results, differentially relative to those control group countries, the PFA brought in, let's say, better fiscal transparency, accountability, or not, right? So of course, that's the question mark. I think that will make the research definitely stronger. So that's a direction I recommend, for this study. And I think also we probably need more micro studies. So maybe that field study part, the qualitative, what you call the qualitative part of the research, is going in that direction, right? So go a little bit deeper into some countries and look at what the PFA process has done really for them, right? So you're of course doing it in a little bit different approach than what I would think. With the micro studies, what I have in mind is to look at micro data, household surveys, but large surveys, right? So not just interviews, but large surveys that, and see whether, from gender-related variables to poverty to other development outcomes, see if you are actually seeing, in those countries, especially if there are different regions, and we also have the subnational PFA, right? So if you are looking at a different outcome in those regions that have done the PFA as opposed to the other ones, looking at the micro data, you will have no problem with the number of observations in that case, and you will probably get a little bit better precision with the statistical analysis, the econometrics, if you do that. I'll end it with something that we often do, because part of my research is more in regional economics as well. Spatial correlations, right? So there's definitely a special aspect of PFA because, well, I said it before, the Sub-Saharan Africa is the big group, right? So almost half of the observations are from there. So that kind of begs the question: are we seeing special patterns in the following sense? I'm just throwing it out there that a PFA process in one country, is that leading to, potentially also better outcomes for those things that you're measuring in neighboring countries, like a neighborhood effect? Are there these positive spillovers? I hope that there won't be negative spillovers, but are they positive spillovers? Of course, if you have very strong spatial autocorrelation, then it also creates econometrics problems. You need to take care of it. But I'm also thinking more conceptually that we should probably be looking at, again, maybe this is a digging deeper aspect of it, looking at specific regions and looking at spatial connections, spatial patterns with the PFA process, because that will probably give us a little bit more in analyzing the outcome, from the PFA process. That's all I have in my notes, and again, I really enjoyed reading the report. Very good presentation, very good discussion overall in this webinar, and it's a pleasure to be in this webinar. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Now we'll go to New York, Darlene.
very much for inviting me. So my name is Darlene Zolbara, and I'm a principal at the International Federation of Accountants. So first, I want to congratulate the author of the papers and PFA for supporting the development of this paper. And it's really an honor for me to join this discussion. The finding of the paper underscore pivotal truths that strong PFM reform and systems are instrumental in enhancing fiscal transparency and public accountability. So today I want to share three key reflections. The first one is the significance of the PFA research findings and what they tell us about the PFM reform efforts. So what we can say that the report highlights that nations with well-structured PFM system exhibit a higher level of fiscal transparency and accountability. However, the research also points out the challenges such as weak enforcement and political interference that can undermine this system. Specifically, that the effectiveness of institutional oversight mechanisms like supreme audit institutions and parliamentary committees varies, often due to the political dynamics and capacity constraints. The COVID-19 pandemic further exposed those vulnerabilities, and especially in the procurement process, and it emphasizes the need for resilient and adaptable PFM framework. So how IFAC and the global accountancy profession can contribute to strengthening PFM and accountability. So at the International Federation of Accountants, we recognize the critical role that strong PFM plays in building trust and enhancing transparency and accountability in the public sector. Professional accountants are key to implementing and maintaining effective PFM systems. They act in the public interest, helping government navigate complex fiscal decisions, enhance efficiency, and build public trust while safeguarding against corruption and illicit financial flows. Professional accountancy organizations play a key role in maintaining high ethical and professional standards by providing training and certification to public sector accountants. So our commitment is reflected in several key initiatives. The first is the Mosaic, which is a memorandum of understanding to strengthen accountancy and improve collaboration that IFAC has established with international donors and the development community to increase the capacity of professional accountancy organizations in emerging economies. This partnership really aims to improve the quality of accountancy and financial management system and enhance the effectiveness and efficiency of donor assistance. And thank you so much, by the way, Srini, for your chairmanship of the Mosaic. The second part is the advocacy for transparency. So IFAC consistently advocates for greater transparency and accountability in the public sector. We emphasize that government must provide clear and comprehensive information about their financial performance, especially in times of crisis. This transparency is vital for informed decision-making and maintaining public trust. High-quality global public sector accounting standards are critical to strong PFM, playing a significant role in supporting public sector transparency and comparability, accountability, and decision-making. So IFAC strongly advocates for the adoption and implementation of accrual accounting, in particular, the accrual basis international public sector accounting standards. Third is our support to PFM reform. We actively support PFM reforms by providing guidance and resources to professional accountancy organizations and governments. Our focus is on ensuring that PFM systems are not only robust, but also adaptable to changing circumstances, thereby enabling better public sector results. The third, and given this insight, what can we do? So we have two calls to action. So first, development partner must invest in PFM capacity building. So donor and international organizations must support PAOs and finance professionals to enhance their skills and knowledge. Long-term success in PFM reform depends on having competent and well-trained public sector accountants. The second call to action is that professional accountants must be at the forefront of PFM strengthening. The accountancy profession must continue to push for high standards of transparency, ethics, and public sector financial integrity. And professional accountants can serve as trusted advisors to government in designing and implementing effective PFM systems. So to conclude, I think this PIFA research report provides very valuable insights into the strengths and challenges of PFM system in developing countries. It reinforces the imperative for continuous improvement and adaptation of this system to enhance transparency and accountability. And at IFAC, we remain dedicated to supporting this effort through collaboration, advocacy, and capacity building. So together, by strengthening PFM reform frameworks and empowering accounting professionals, we can build more transparent, accountable, and resilient public sector that serves the need of all citizens. So thank you so much for the opportunity to give you our insight. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. We have lots of interaction going on the chat, questions and answers. I'm going to turn to Dimitri to summarize the questions for the research team.
Thank you, Serdar. Hello, colleagues. We have several questions. Most of them, unfortunately, have been already addressed by the authors in the chat. Thank you very much for the follow-up. I will thus mention just some of them that have not been fully addressed in the chat. There is a question from Mohan Dakal from Nepal, who's saying that PFM reforms are progressing slowly in the country. Considering the complexity of the context, replicating successful practices from other countries could be beneficial. What are some promising practices or success stories you have observed in strengthening PFM system to enhance fiscal transparency and public accountability that could be useful for Nepal? And since Nepal was one of the research country, it would be interesting to hear authors' insight on that. There is another question from Abshir. How can PFM system achieve performance standards that enhance their credibility, transparency, and effectiveness in context of least developing countries?
Yeah, I unmuted now. Go ahead. No, it was unmuted.
Both questions?
No, continue.
So let's respond these two questions for now, because we are running a little bit of time, and if we still have time, we can follow up on some of other questions.
Okay, over to the research team.
Thank you, Dimitri. Thank you, Sardar. Pawan, would you like to go for this Nepal question?
Yeah, I think it's thank you very much, Mo. I think this is like what system works in some let's say in a particular country. I think we see that, let's say, some elements of PFA working well in one country, but other elements working well in other countries. And so I think varies depend. Like in the case of Nepal, we found that's kind of how this kind of treasury single system or the digitalization kind of working well, but like this enforcement of this regulation, especially this budget irregularities is not working well. It's increasing all the time. So people are questioning, despite the reforms of the last 20 years, why the systems hasn't improved as intended. So I think that's about the good practice. I think let's say we mostly talk about this how this wider engagement, right? Because how the reform can work in particular context. Then of course the first thing is, I think we need to know the context, because you already mentioned about culture. So probably one solution could be this wider engagement of stakeholders. I think that could be one solution for Nepal, because let's say when the reform occur, it's very much driven by policymaker, and I can see that very less opportunity for other members to engage. They say there's no engagement of research, or no engagement of expertise, no engagement of like this many different policymakers. It's just like 2 or 3, let's say OAG, or there's a people from this accountant general office. Those people are involved, and then there's it's very top-down approach. So it may be a problem, and not only in Nepal, in many developing countries. That's my view. Yeah.
Anybody else from the team? All right. I think we are coming to the end of our time allocated, but this is an important question for us. We are going to continue researching PIFA, using PIFA. One of the things that I want to highlight, I want to see PIFA on the right-hand side, not the left-hand side. I mean, explaining a PIFA score is one thing and it requires other variables, I suspect. But I want to understand if PFA explains something, if PFA is correlated something. That's the direction that we are heading right now with our research program. And we want to also show the rest of the world that PFA is correlated or explains certain things, whether it is budget discipline or transparency or increased accountability. Those are the areas that we are going to continue investigating, and we have a small research team, and we are going to organize more of these kinds of webinars to discuss all of these things. Thank you all. Thanks for participating.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Pedro. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.